Fair Housing Council to talk about some of the ways that we can interact with landlords and make sure that they are being fair with us. So I will let Carrie take over.
Do you want to stand up here?
No, I'll stand behind.
Okay. Then, yeah, you can use that. That's okay. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Lewis. I'm the Assistant Director at Kentucky Fair Housing Council. I brought with me Annie Renner. She is our programs coordinator. She also does outreach and education with me. We're going to talk to you guys about what fair housing is and what the protected classes are that go under fair housing. And then we're going to talk to you basically mainly about disability protections. And then what we want to know what you guys see in the community you're in and what kind of questions you have and what we can answer for you guys. So what Kentucky Fair Housing is, what we do, we are the only nonprofit agency in Kentucky that is fighting fair housing. We have a lawyer on staff, his name is Art Crosby, and then we have me on staff, the assistant director, and then Annie Renner, our programs coordinator, who also does our intake, and then we do have an AmeriCorps member on staff. So what we do, we serve the entire state of Kentucky. We do outreach and education, we do advocacy and legal representation, and then we do something called discrimination testing, where it's kind of like the enforcement part of fair housing, where we go out and we kind of see if there's still discrimination out there, and we send out renters and they see if there's that discrimination going on, and they report back to us and see what they see in those scenarios. So that's kind of what we do. So why does fair housing matter? Does anybody want to give me a reason why they think it matters? Just shout it out. Why does fair housing matter? Red Riding Hood, shout it out.
Well, I mean, everybody wants the home.
Exactly, it's for stabilization, right? So we all need stabilization. Without stable housing, then we can't have stable jobs, stable living. So it's very important that we have stable housing. It builds equity. It builds and expands everybody's opportunities, right? So that's what fair housing is about. We follow the federal law, we also follow the state law, and we follow local ordinances. So you'll see some local ordinances in Lexington which cover not really a whole lot anymore. Annie, do you know what Lexington's cover anymore?
I'm not sure. I know that Lexington did have some protections for source of income. So Lexington did have some additional protections for source of income. But the main extra ordinance that's really important in Lexington is that we have something called the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act. And what that does is that gives additional responsibilities to landlords that aren't already included in fair housing, for example, or in the state fair housing law. So that's something extra in Lexington that requires certain things like your landlord has to give you a certain amount of time for certain notices. Like if they want to terminate your lease, they have to tell you within 30 days, or actually it has to be 30 days or more. If they want to try to give you a notice for like a lease violation, then they have to give you 14 days for that. So there's just those extra little levels. It adds some additional protections as well for things like making them have the state of the home in a good condition and things like that.
So those are just extra protections here in Lexington. Louisville has a bunch of extra protections as well. So if you know any in Louisville, the source of income would be one. Homelessness. They do veteran status in Louisville as well. And they also do criminal background history in Louisville. So those are just some of those extra protections different cities will see that we don't get to see here in Lexington. But we do have that Uniform Residential Act, like Annie was saying. So that's a good one to go over. So if you have any questions about that, we can always help you out with that. So I'm going to let Annie go over some of the protected classes and go over what those each are and maybe give you a couple examples of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it stands, the Fair Housing Act at the federal level only has 6 protected classes. Obviously at the Fair Housing Council, we want to see everyone protected from discrimination, but it's really important that you understand which classes are protected. So if you think you're experiencing discrimination, you can accurately identify it. So as it stands, our protected classes are race and skin color, national origin, and religion. Those were all included in the original Fair Housing Act. And then later on, we added in familial status, which means if there are children under 18 in the home, and disability was added in. We also have sex, which includes a lot of different things in that category, including domestic violence survivorship status and someone's gender identity or orientation. So there's certain types of properties that are covered by the Fair Housing Act. The list is pretty big. We don't have, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it does include single family homes, apartments. It includes homeless and domestic violence shelters. It also includes nursing homes and student housing, and mobile home parks or rooms for rent. So some types of discrimination that we still see happening would be someone saying that a unit has already been leased when it hasn't, simply because someone's a person of color, charging a higher security deposit to someone with a disability because they might need modifications, threatening to evict someone with a protective order, apartment advertising that says no children is actually discriminatory. And we often see that in a way where they say this is a quiet community. That can be discriminatory towards families with children as well. There's also specific protections against retaliation. So if you contact the Fair Housing Council and then your landlord or property manager retaliates against you for that, that's also considered discrimination. So when we talk about discrimination, there's one of two ways that we typically categorize it in a really broad way, and that's overt versus covert discrimination. When I say overt discrimination, that's when it's really on the face and obvious. So like that advertisement that says no small children. Or if somebody uses racial slurs against a tenant, or creates a hostile environment for them, like just makes it impossible for them to live in their home, constantly harassing them. That's usually overt discrimination. But when we talk about covert discrimination, that's not necessarily meant on the face to be discriminatory, but it has a different impact on people because of a protected class. So the example that we like to use is, let's say a Muslim couple is wanting to rent an apartment, and they fill out an application, and then they're told, oh, we only actually show apartments on Fridays. Well, this particular couple, let's say they're pretty devout, and on Fridays they're usually praying all day long. They're very busy on Fridays with religious activity. So if they don't make an exception for that couple to come on a different day, that could end up potentially being religious discrimination. And it would be covert because it's not necessarily meant inherently to be discriminatory, but it has that discriminatory impact on that couple. So I'll hand it back to you, Carrie, because we're back to our specific section on disability, and I think you wanted it to be more of a open forum for discussion.
So there are two types of disabilities or disability things we see come through our office, and they're called reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications. And so with those, accommodations are requests to be made to a policy, something that needs to change in a policy, that's an accommodation. And most of the ways we see that are through live-in aids and ESAs. Those are the two common ways we see accommodations come through our office. Yeah, I'm going to. And a third way is if someone needs to move from a downstairs apartment to or from a top floor apartment to a downstairs apartment. So the accommodation would be changing a policy for someone's disability need. So the first one we see is that me? Is it too close? Do you hear it like, or is it just me?
There's a little bit of feedback.
Okay. So one of the first ones is live-in aid, right? So a lot of times we need to have a live-in aid help us go through our daily needs. And so a way that we can have an accommodation for that is if the tenant puts out a reasonable accommodation to their landlord and says, I need a live-in aid to help me with my daily tasks. So what happens with that is the landlord then can come back and say, would you have a letter from your doctor's note? And you say, absolutely, I do, landlord. And you give landlord the letter from your doctor's note that says, here, and you're back there being silly, I saw that. At first I saw it and was like, hold on, wait a second, and my eye was doing a trick on me, and then I saw you move him. He had his little googly eyes up under his glasses, guys. So anyway, the landlord will go ahead and allow that request if you have a doctor's letter. But what if the landlord says, no, you can't have a live-in aid? So why would they say that? Sometimes the landlord thinks that the live-in aid is responsible for rent. That is not the case. The live-in aid is not responsible for rent. The only thing the live-in aid has to do is complete a background check, if that's what they require. They must follow that rule. If they can clear the background check, that is in policy for their place, then everything is good. The second type we see is for reasonable accommodation for transfer units. That transfer unit could be from a downstairs unit from an upstairs unit to a downstairs unit, or from transferring from one unit to another unit that is more accessible. So we see that a lot of times, and then we see ESAs. Does anybody have an ESA here?
What is it?
What's that stand for?
An emotional support animal.
I was gonna
Nobody.
bring that, I have a service dog, but that's not what
Okay.
he's.
No, service dogs are a little bit different, so I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin. So
Yeah.
service dogs are a little bit different than emotional support animal dogs. A service dog, what Kevin has, is something that is registered and has to be trained. But an emotional support animal does not have to be trained. Kevin's dog also does not have to be charged, they don't charge for pet deposits or fees. Same with emotional support animals. It no longer becomes a pet once it transitions into that alleviating a need for a disability. So once that emotional support animal is alleviating a need for a disability, no pet deposits, no pet fees, and they can't do breed restrictions or anything like that on those. So as long as we have those things on there, we're good. We just need a doctor's letter, vaccines, things like that. What kind of things do you guys see in your community that are happening to you guys all the time? Kevin, go.
I moved from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 1-bedroom, that'll be pretty soon 2 months ago. And I'm trying to figure out, why did my rent drop? It increased by about $50. Something about utilities aren't covered. I don't know what they were meeting or anything.
Okay, Kevin, I want you to talk to us later, okay?
Okay.
So we'll talk to you about that. That's something we could probably help you with, Kevin. So another type of accommodation we see are a lot of times are for visual needs, right? This is why we're here. We need visual access. If you live in a federally funded apartment complex or building, they are required to give you visual access to your lease or to any documents. That means if you are required to maybe have that lease blown up so you can read it better. Sometimes we can get Braille. Braille is super expensive. So, but we can try to have an interpreter there. Sometimes they can bring an interpreter in to read that for you and help read that through the process. That is part of their obligation if they are federally funded. So that's something else we like to let you guys know. Modifications. Do you guys see a lot of modifications where you live or need modifications? Do we know what modifications are?
Lighting, extra lighting.
Yes, it could be extra lighting. It could be tactile. Grab bars. It could be tactile braille for your light switches and things like that. Those are reasonable accommodations, modifications as well. So if anybody needs those, please reach out to our office. We can help facilitate the interactive process with your landlord to get those done. Annie, I'm gonna let Annie talk some more about some disability and modifications and what we see in our office.
Yeah, so when it comes to a modification, that's going to be any kind of structural change that's needed for a disability. So oftentimes we're helping people get things like wheelchair ramps or grab bars, like you guys mentioned.
We gotta pull up our PowerPoint.
We've kind of made this more conversational than our typical presentation, so that way you all have a chance to ask questions. So some important things to remember when it comes to reasonable modifications is there are some specific rules about that. So it has to be that whoever's requesting the modification is going to be living there. And keep in mind, you can have somebody make a modification request on your behalf. That person doesn't have to live there, but whoever the modification is for must live in that home or in that apartment. The landlord can also ask tenants to restore the unit to the condition that it was in previously. A deposit can be asked for as well to cover that restoration. So let's say you need a modification and you may not have the ability yourself to return it to that condition, you can give your landlord a deposit to be able to pay for that service later on.
Do they always make you restore it? Like if you install grab bars, would they make you like take those out and repaint
They
and all
may. Now, if you live in a federally funded unit or apartment or home, then they have to cover the cost of that themselves.
that? Oh, okay.
But if it's, privately owned, you are required to either restore it to that condition or provide a deposit. Now, we think it's a best practice if the landlord or homeowner or whomever goes ahead and just does that themselves. We think that would be great, but legally they're allowed to ask for the money for it or ask for it to be put back into that condition that it was before.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. They can even say it can stay. They
Yeah,
could.
so not necessarily. If you have a really good landlord, they might be like, yeah, this is great. I would love to rent this home to somebody else who needs grab bars in the future and let you leave it. It just depends when it's private. Yes, sir, they're in the back.
Who pays for the modifications to begin with?
So if it's federally funded, then it should be the property owners, management, whomever. If it's privately owned, then they can ask a tenant to do that.
When you say federally funded, so if that person is like a HUD or?
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. If they accept those,
Income-based housing.
income-based,
Okay.
HUD subsidies, all of that.
Yep.
Yes, they're in the back, ma'am.
It's an unusual question, and
We love unusual questions in our
it's
office.
not a broad-based thing. I live in, a large independent living senior building
Mm-hmm.
that also has another building for assisted living
Okay,
and another building for memory.
okay, gotcha.
And there was a woman in the independent building who seemed to need a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
She was nice enough, not violent or anything. And I asked around as to why she was still she needed more help than being independent.
Right.
And the answer that I got was the company cannot force her to move to assisted living or memory because it would be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So I wondered how that works.
That is an interesting question, and I'll let Carrie give her thoughts on this as well. But my primary thought about that is under the Fair Housing Act, you can't force an accommodation or a modification on someone. The person, the tenant, or whoever is living in the home has to ask for that. So you can't really push that on someone. Now, not knowing the particulars of this program, if it is more of a medically based program, then it sounds like they probably should have reassessed that tenant to see if she would have been better suited for somewhere else. But as far as the Fair Housing Act goes, there isn't a requirement for landlords or homeowners or property managers to preemptively give someone an accommodation or a modification. So a landlord can't say, oh, hi Carrie, I see you use a walker, I'm gonna give you a ramp, unless Carrie asks for that ramp.
Yeah, she eventually moved not to assisted living, which is the next step down, but went right to memory. And
Right.
She was very nice and, in all kind of ways, and did talk that, she was clearly had
She needed that extra
beginning
assistance.
stages of dementia, I guess.
Right.
And they worked with the family to get them to agree to move her, I guess. And I guess that's where the
Mm-hmm.
Fair Housing Act comes in, you have to agree to do it.
Yeah, like I said, they can't force an accommodation on someone, but I'll let Carrie give some more of her thoughts on that too.
Annie is right on that. Another way to look at it is, we use this example oftentimes in familial status. This would be like having the house that you're gonna go rent and you have children, the house has lead paint. You can't tell the parent, watch your child, make sure they don't eat the lead paint, because that's not your job, right? So that's kind of the same scenario. It would be their own responsibility, and whoever has the power of attorney over them to decide for them if that's right for them or not before they can make Yeah, cause the landlord can't, or the housing provider, or the senior center can't decide for you what accommodation or what, modification or anything you may need, assistance you may need, unless it's 100% that's their job and that's what the facility's for. But if it's like a step down, that's probably why.
Well, the thing, part of the consideration is the cost.
Yeah.
Cause the cost, I don't know, almost doubles if you
Oh,
go
for sure.
into assisted or memory care. And that's why I guess it took the family a long time to agree to move her.
Right,
Yeah.
that would be another reason they wouldn't preemptively do that, like you're saying, if they know it's gonna be an increased cost, they can't really force it. I'm assuming if there's like a doctor's statement or something, maybe they could in that sort of
Yeah.
situation, with it being a bit different with senior living, but they definitely couldn't force an accommodation on someone that's gonna make them have to pay a lot more for services without their consent.
Yeah.
May I
Hello?
address that from experience?
Yes.
Absolutely.
With Sayre, I don't know how the other
Yeah,
facilities were, but my mother was at Sayre in assisted living
talk
for
right now.
7
Goodbye.
years. And she had many people that we knew and became engaged with in those families. And once their patient or their resident became unable to handle the level they were on, that was a decision the facility made. And then they presented it to the family, and the family had to agree to make accommodations and adjust either to a different level of care, or we called it move up on the hill, because their nursing home in Emory is a higher up building than Friendship Tower.
Yeah, that
So
makes
I
sense.
think it's the facility has that
The
agreement
ability
to
to make the
say,
assessment.
you
and then
qualify
present
for this level, and when you're no longer in this level, then you have to relocate.
Thanks for providing that extra clarification for us. I personally, I've been with the Fair Housing Council for a year as of this month, and I haven't dealt with a lot of the
Yeah.
senior living centers yet, so I appreciate that.
Yes, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Once again, me, I will mention anybody whose family is talking about maybe you shouldn't live alone. I've been there. What I've learned is as long as I'm safe for myself, I'm not gonna hurt myself or others. That's really a big one. In other words, I'm talking about power of attorney. If your family, is saying you wouldn't be good to live alone and you think you are, as long as you have they're not the ones that have the power of attorney, but you do, you have every right to live where you want.
Yep. You're right, Kevin.
Absolutely, and that's the whole point for fair housing is it's the choice to choose your own housing free of discrimination as much as possible. That's our entire goal with the Fair Housing Council.
You guys got really good questions. Are there any other
Yeah, thank you
questions?
so much.
Yes.
I have a sister who really does need a ESA. I never heard that expression before, and I always thought they had to be trained, like,
No.
be trained. But she doesn't live in this area, she lives in Illinois, so I
Same
wonder.
rules apply. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
so emotional support animals are protected by the Federal Fair Housing Act. So your sister in Illinois should still have the right to request an emotional support animal as a reasonable accommodation, as long as she's able to provide the doctor's note saying that she needs an emotional support animal. They can also ask her for the vaccination records for the animal, and if there's a local license requirement, like here in the city of Lexington, for example, I have to have a pet license for my cat. If her town requires that, then they can ask to have that record too. But that's the only thing that they can ask. They can't require that it be a certain animal or a certain size or a certain breed. They can't even require that they be neutered, actually. So the only time that they can really tell you you can't have an emotional support animal is if it becomes a danger to other people.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
where do you find this information again in Illinois then?
So she would just look it up on the Federal Fair Housing Act. We could also,
Where does she live in Illinois?
Yeah.
Arlington Heights.
Arlington? Okay, let me see what the closest Fair Housing Council would be for
Now,
her.
she doesn't, she owns her own, she lives in a, condo.
Yeah, it would
But
work.
they
That's
have-
the same
Yeah,
thing.
it still
Yep.
applies. Condominiums
apply.
are also covered by the Fair Housing Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, she would just need that doctor's letter from her doctor that she sees all the time, saying that she needs the emotional support animal to alleviate a need of a disability, and that's
Right.
all the letter needs to say. Yeah.
Oh.
I was wondering, like, say for instance, if somebody had like a pit bull that becomes a problem, especially.
If they're violent.
Yeah, if
they
the
become-
animal becomes dangerous, then the property management, landlord, homeowner, whomever can ask that that animal specifically be removed. But they can't then say, oh, you're not allowed to have any emotional support animals ever. They can only say, I'm sorry, you can't have this aggressive animal, you can have another animal, but this one is a liability and it's dangerous, you may not bring this animal back.
Yes, Teresa.
What if, like, if I had an emotional support animal that was a tomcat and he's spraying all over the apartment and they want me to get rid of the cat because of the damage it's doing, can they do that?
If there's enough damage there, yes. If it causes undue financial burden and hardship, so say they have to replace all the carpet in your whole entire apartment, and it's complete carpet from the living room to the kitchen to the bedrooms to the bathroom, and they're like, this is gonna cost me $5,000 because your cat did this, and they're like, this is just too much money, can you please get rid of your cat? Now, you could probably call us and we might be able to help, cause,
But you'll probably
but you
still be
probably have
liable
to,
for the
yeah,
damages.
liable for the damages, yeah.
So the landlord can still ask you to clean up after an emotional
Yes.
support animal, and they can still hold you liable for damages to the home or the apartment due to an emotional support animal. So like, if somebody's got a pit bull and it doesn't bite anybody, but it likes to tear holes in the drywall, you still have to pay for those holes in the drywall, they just might not tell you to make the animal leave.
Right.
But if it's an unreasonable amount, then they can still request that you get a different animal.
Yep. She's like,
Yeah.
what, wait, there's more.
One more question.
Sure.
Say my neighbor has an emotional support animal that's a dog and they are terrible about picking up after the dog when it goes outside.
They still have to pick up after the dog.
But, so could the landlord kick them out because they're?
No, the landlord could lease violate them for not picking up their dog, but not to have, they couldn't ask them to get rid of the dog. They
Okay.
could just lease violate them for not picking up after the dog.
What's lease violation mean?
So it would be, so part of your lease, and any lease should state some terms, right, that say you must pay this amount of rent on this day, that's a lease term. And then another lease term could be, if you have an animal, you must pick up after your animal. So then a lease violation would be, I didn't follow that lease term by picking up after my animal, so I'm gonna get a 7-day lease violation, or 14, I'm sorry, it's a 14-day lease violation. So what that means is I have 14 days to fix that action. If I don't fix that action, they can then give me a 30-day notice to leave.
Okay.
So
So they could eventually
yes, if you have,
ask you to leave if you keep having lease violations for that
Yes.
act.
yes, exactly. They can have, we'll only give you 3 lease violations in this amount of time for this same lease violation, and then what? Give you a lease termination. That's probably in the lease as well, something of that standard, yeah.
Legally, they only have to give you the one lease violation notice.
Yes.
And if you don't correct it, then they can proceed to a lawful eviction process, which still requires that they give you the notice, and then if you don't vacate, then they have to file and get a court date, and then you still have a court hearing, and then you get the date from the judge. So if there's ever an eviction that's going on, and they've just given you a notice, and then let's say they show up a week later and say, get all of your stuff out right now, that's an illegal eviction, and that's also something that we, or Legal Aid of the Bluegrass, helps people with here in Lexington. So they still have to go through that full eviction process regardless of the type of lease violation.
Good questions.
Yep.
A reverse thought, let's say you have a resident that lives, I've been reading all the apartment violations and problems with apartment complexes. Let's say you have a resident that lives in an apartment complex and say there had been an electrical issue and they had to come in and run new current lines or new hookups and all of that, and they had holes all over the kitchen drywall. And the management never followed back up with doing a repair on that. And residents have concern that if they create a whole lot of hassle, then they would be penalized or harassed because they were causing a problem for management. How do they handle that with the different, I know that's possibly under code violation issue.
Yeah, it would be a code violation, they would call code enforcement, but also they can't retaliate because you call code enforcement or call our office.
They can't raise.
They can't retaliate.
Rent, they can't.
No, they can't raise rent, they can't start giving lease violations out of nowhere because you ask for a
We have a lot of
repair.
apartment complexes in Lexington that have had major issues.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we do, yes, we do. And unfortunately, there's lots of laws for the landlords and not very many laws for
For the residents.
for the residents. As you can see, there's only 6 protected classes.
Right.
And that's not hardly any part of the population. So, yeah, it's a struggle.
And Lexington has those extra protections from the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act, but at the same time, there isn't a law that says you can't be a bad landlord. You just have to make sure that it's livable and that you don't evict people without proper notice. Everything in between there, really, landlords don't get in that much trouble for, to be honest with you.
And the biggest thing is pay your rent.
Yes.
Always pay your rent, even if they're not following through with their lease, part of their lease. If you go in front of a judge and the judge sees you haven't paid your rent, you will be evicted no matter what. Doesn't matter if the landlord was holding up their end of the bargain or not. They don't care. If you didn't pay the rent, you weren't holding up your part, and that's all that matters. Yes, Teresa?
What about heat and air? Are those things, if you're in HUD or federally funded housing, is that required? Cause I've had people not have air at all and have like one window in a studio apartment, so there's no flow. And they've also been without heat for like a month out of the winter, they would have no heat.
Yeah, so that would be something that they are supposed to provide. In the state of Kentucky, I believe there's a certain time of the year, if I'm not mistaken, it's between like May and now, that there is a requirement that they have air conditioning in the home or the apartment, and then the other part of the year, there is a requirement in the state of Kentucky that they have heat. So if you have someone who has no heat or air whatsoever, and that means that they haven't come and given window units, they haven't provided fans, they haven't provided heaters, that's a code violation. Now the landlords can kind of skip by it if they give you those little portable air conditioners and heaters sometimes, but still they should be providing you with information about when a full repair should be completed. And if they don't complete it, then you can call code enforcement.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this something that you could ask, like if you have a property that's a house and like could you ask that somebody does not smoke in the home? Is that something that's
A landlord can make that as a requirement of the lease, yes.
Yeah.
That's not a violation of anything to make it a non-smoking unit or home.
Okay, and then like say another thing, just like say for instance, if somebody's growing like an illegal substance like marijuana or something like with it, how would you deal with that?
So the way it works right now with the medical marijuana in Kentucky is only consumables. So I'm talking about like, you know, an edible or like tincture is the way a lot of people use medical marijuana. That's what's currently protected in the state of Kentucky with that medical marijuana license and everything. So if someone's smoking, that's not protected. If they're growing it, that's not protected either. So that's illegal just entirely. Most leases will have a clause that if someone's using a home to engage in criminal activity, that it will void the lease. They should still follow a legal eviction process for that, but they can also make a criminal report to the police.
Report it to your landlord, report it to police.
Yeah, so if you are a tenant and you're having that issue with a neighbor, absolutely report it to your landlord, and then you can report to the police as well.
So that would be something that they could actually evict you for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The way it stands right now. The main thing with fair housing is that some of this stuff changes a lot. So especially with like this medical marijuana rise that we're seeing across the country and in the state of Kentucky, we're also kind of feeling those things out. But right now it's only consumable marijuana that is allowed under medical marijuana. And recreational is not protected at all.
So like, well, I got a license. I mean, you know, I have a
medical card.
Your medical card, yep.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
non-smokable. So,
Right now.
yeah, non-smokable.
That's our understanding as well. If that's changed in the past couple of weeks, then I apologize. But our understanding, as we've been helping people at the Fair Housing Council who have disabilities and medical marijuana cards, is that they have to understand that right now, our understanding is that it's only consumable.
Okay.
You all have some really great questions. Thank you so much.
More interactive than some of our other groups.
Yeah, absolutely. You all have any other fair housing questions or just general concerns we might be able to help with?
How would we, get in contact with your office?
We brought our cards.
Yes, we do
but
have business cards.
Teresa has our info.
We also have a website. It's
Yep.
kyfairhousing.org. You can also call our office directly. We're usually in office starting around 8:30 to as late as 3:30. And Teresa has our phone number if you'd like to call us.
And they have a wonderful newsletter. You could sign up for the newsletter.
Yes, we do.
Yes,
Thank you for
we
giving us
do
a
have
plug,
a newsletter.
Teresa.
Thank
That's
you
how
so
I found
much.
out about you.
Yeah.
Great, yeah, so we've got a monthly newsletter that comes out, that you can also, stay in touch. We do highlight on protected classes and talk a little bit about extra protections for each of those, and then we also share a lot of community events, so it's a great, resource for the community on fair housing and just housing in general.
What if you have violations, in the apartment that you're living in, and do they fall under code? I mean, not violations, but, like say for instance, you don't have water for a week, and they're not coming to fix your water, you're still running code, and is that a code violation, or?
Yeah, that's a code
How do you
violation.
determine between what's a code violation and what's a fair housing violation?
If anything needs repaired in your house, that's gonna be code. Anything repaired, lights, heat, air, refrigerator, stove, anything that needs repaired is gonna be code enforcement. And fair housing is gonna be where you feel like something just isn't right, you're not being treated something's not right, you're just not quite being treated right, and you just can feel it. That's fair housing. It's a little bit different, yeah. Yes, Teresa?
If a person isn't able to read their mail or read print, can they request as an accommodation that if the landlord is going to send them a letter for violations or anything else that they call them and tell them, or?
Yes.
Yeah, we've helped people get that accommodation in the past.
Okay.
Absolutely, so if you know anyone, we can help with that.
Okay, so they can ask their landlord for that as an accommodation, and
Absolutely.
if they don't wanna do that, then they can contact you to help them.
Absolutely.
100%.
I really never
100%
realized that.
We'll be there
That's a
to
good
fight, yes, absolutely, they can ask for that.
Yes.
Yes, and if it's a federally funded apartment complex, they have to do it, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, if it's not federally funded, they can tell you no, but is that a best practice? No.
And it could end up being discriminatory.
And it
if they
could
just
end up
flat
being-
out refuse
yeah, if
to
it's
have
a-
an interactive process.
Yeah, cause it has to be an interactive process. Yeah, Kevin?
I've had a situation, I don't know how they got in there, but I had roaches, and, they treat it for them every so often.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I think that old apartment, they finally got them out of there, but, what I learned is you cannot use these, insecticides or whatever, cause that's technically a violation of the lease, and, those who are trying to get the roaches might think there's no problem, when there actually is.
Right, yep.
That would be a situation to get in touch with code enforcement. If they've done the pest control and it's been ineffective, but they won't let you do your own pest control, that would be a good time to call code,
Okay.
for sure.
Yes, Teresa?
So, we have had people before that are visually impaired,
Mhm.
they also need, ramps and grab bars. And they were told by the landlord, and they are HUD, and they were told by the landlord that they had to provide those themselves.
No.
No.
Yeah, that's a violation of fair housing for sure.
They definitely call us if they tell your county
Okay.
staff, yes. have them call us so we can be nice to them.
So you're saying.
So you
I
can
li- I
educate
live
them.
on the-
Yes,
I live-
exactly.
I live on the 3rd floor and I'm 100% blind.
Mhm.
If I wanted to move to the 1st floor and they wanted to charge me another security deposit, is that unfair or is it
Yes, that's
fair?
unfair.
That's
And that
unfair?
you said you're in
So I
public.
don't have to have a duplicate
No,
deposit?
no, so you should contact our office. Have you put in for a reasonable accommodation to move?
Not yet,
Okay.
but I am.
If you want to contact our office, then we can help you, get that letter wrote up and then have that interactive process with them.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have another question? I kinda saw you.
Well, I forgot that fast, but never mind. Like, well, no, I know what it is. Well, you said code. Is code still the thing with fair housing, or you have to call the city or something?
The
That's
city,
the city.
yeah,
311.
yes, 311.
Yep, code enforcement is through the city, but our agency is a nonprofit, we're private, and we advocate on behalf of our clients, so we're allowed to be biased.
Yeah, we will be on your side all the way, whereas 311 will not be.
Yes, they just come and do an inspection and look at the facts, that's the only.
So you all are a nonprofit, you're not
Yes.
a state agency?
No, we're federally funded.
We're federally funded
Funded.
nonprofit, but we're not part of the government.
No.
Okay, didn't know that.
Kevin, did you have a question?
What if, you have suspicion that your neighbors might be doing some illegal things like selling drugs or, what do we, cause I've had a situation where I called the police and said, bring a drug dog over, cause those dogs can detect traces of drugs even if, long after they're gone.
Yeah, so that's similar to that question we got about marijuana use.
Mhm.
If you think somebody's not following medical marijuana laws in Kentucky, where we would suggest that you start with reporting it to your landlord. Give the landlord a little bit of time to respond and then report to the police.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the best way to handle that sort of situation in the same way. If you think that there's criminal activity going on with another tenant at the unit, report to landlord and then report to police.
Good questions. Anything else? You guys were a good crowd.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Fun. Except for our sleeping ringmaster. I caught you with your eyes closed.
Calling us all out. I got offended.
So would you pass out cards
Yes,
to those of us who want them?
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes,
100%.
we can. Annie will do
A lot
that.
of questions, Philip.
What?
A lot of questions.
And we can also put your contact information in our next newsletter.
Yes, please
November
do.
1
That way if anybody
newsletter.
needs to reach out to us,
So it'll be there.
that would be amazing.
And people can call the office too.
Yes.
Where are you located?
Here in Lexington on Reynolds Road, kinda over by the mall. Right beside, what is it, White Castle?
Do you guys
I
have
know
service?
exactly where you are.
Yeah, if you go to the light right by Fayette Mall,
Oh,
where Target's at,
oh,
if you turn left instead of right,
is it
we're
like,
left down Reynolds Road.
is it like
Towards
Applebee's?
Hacienda.
Yes, exactly.
Towards Hacienda, that's
Yeah,
Hacienda.
across from that White Castle is Fayette Veterinary Clinic.
Ah.
Yes, yeah, we're at that
So,
same little
Yeah,
block.
I know exactly where you are.
Anyone who would like a business card from both of us, raise your
White Castle.
hands.
No, no, what was it nearby Applebee's?
No, we're near Fayette Mall, right, if you're at the light when you come off 4 and you're right beside Target, and if you turn right to Target, we're left instead.
Oh, okay, not on that side. I'm thinking of the
Yeah.
White Castles on the
Between
other
us,
side.
Towards green.
Green.
What's it turn into? Green?
Toward Lansdowne Road, Lansdowne.
Yeah, I was thinking there's a White
Reynolds
Castles
Road turns
there.
into something else. past-
Green Lawn.
Green Lawn.
Green Lawn, yeah.
There was a White Castles
So you're
here,
doing yours then?
There's Carrie's
where
card.
Joanne Fabrics used to be.
You can talk to
I didn't know there was
either of us.
Yeah, there's, an old Walgreens right there now that just closed down.
I think that would, if I was thinking about it, would be
Is that
good
it?
to
Are we
have
done?
oversight,
Yeah,
like,
well, you can call me.
so rivers or this is yours.
Yeah, the mall's right here.
Oh, no, I really
They're
care
down
down
there.
there.
Well, I do think
Before
so
the
you
mall.
can keep mine.
Charles.
Okay, this is your card.
Yeah.
Hey, Herman Lucky's eyebrow, can you take care of that?
Would anybody else
Herman
like
Lucky's
this
eyebrow.
card?
Business card, anyone else raise your hand? No?
Harry's is on the top and mine's on the bottom.
Annie at the same table, right? Annie.
Yes, we work with anybody in the state of Kentucky. Anyone who says they face discrimination can get our services for free. We never charge for anything.
Want the microphone back?
Are you all done?
Yes, I hit 2 miles already.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and I would love it if you would give a round of applause to our speakers and show your appreciation. Yes, that was a lot of really great information. We are very grateful. Thanks for coming out and being here in person and for sharing all of that information. I wish I had known this information a lot earlier, but moving forward, I know where to send people. So thanks again for being here. Thanks to everybody for coming out today and for costumes and for having fun with us. And please keep your eyes open for those newsletters coming in email or print, and it's also on our recording. Remember that if you dial the BCB office and press 8, you'll get the newsletter, press 9, you'll get the most recent calendar that you can listen to audibly. And if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to share their information.
Don't forget, one of the speakers needs to talk to me about the
Yes, Kevin.
rent situation.
Yes. All right. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon and have a great Halloween and be safe.
Thank you.
Can I give you my business card?
You email me.
I can email you, yes.
I'll give you my email.
Yep, I have a pen. This is the signature at it. I'll get your email.
Nice meeting you, Paul.
Okay, that's cool. You know when you're ready.
I'm sorry, I dropped my pen in here. I have to officially do it. There you go. All right, ready, Kevin.
It's KM as in Mike, INOR 65. Cool.
I got one question.
Yes, Charles, sir.
Now, last year, when I had to sign a new release, they said, one part of the new release was not supposed to have any marijuana on the property.
They can make that
Good job.
regulation, if you want like a medical card, then you can ask for an accommodation.
What now?
So they can say in the lease that they don't allow any, marijuana. But if you have a medical card for medical marijuana, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation.
It's straight here at the
And then they
yeah,
would
it's
have
kinda got a
to
little Michael
interact,
Jackson thing going on.
interact with processing, quality, figure out how they can accommodate.
Yeah, okay. Somehow there was something in that legislation was supposed to have any marijuana on the property. Or not in the building.
You enjoying the library?
Yeah, I think someone had some marijuana where they had to go outside and smoke it. Not in the building, yeah.
Alright, Charles, it was nice meeting you.
Now, are they supposed to, give you a copy of the lease? That you signed?
If you ask for a copy, they should be how big they are. Thank you,
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye, Charles.
Thank y'all very much, I appreciate it, I appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Here's your phone.
For people that want to.
It is. Who am I talking to?
Keisha. How are you? Hi, how are you doing? I'm good. Are you leaving right now? I work at a restaurant. Can I go with you?
Hi, Phil.
Okay, we will look at everything. Stay right there.
He's here. What time is it?
Are you enjoying your year?
No, it's.
Oh, and something else there?
I still have.
Bye, Sarah.
Take care, good to see you.
I know.